I used to think that the first thing women noticed about a man was his appearance, the clothes, the hairstyle, maybe the build. But the more I observed people, the more I realized something surprising. The first impression forms long before anyone has time to judge those details. It happens in a moment, so quick you can miss it if you blink. And the real key isn't on the surface at all. It comes from what a man carries inside. I remember one moment clearly. I walked into a coffee shop on a busy afternoon. The place was filled with quiet chatter, soft music, and the smell of roasted beans. I didn't come there for anything special, just a break from the day. As I stepped in, my eyes landed on a girl sitting near the window. She was completely absorbed in her book, sunlight reflecting on the pages. Then, for just a second, she looked up, and our eyes met. That split second changed everything I thought I knew. In that moment, I realized she wasn't looking at my shoes or my jacket. She wasn't scanning my haircut or trying to guess my style. She was reading something deeper, something I wasn't even fully aware I was showing. My posture, my calmness, the way I entered the room. It was like she felt my energy before she analyzed anything else. And that's when it clicked. Presence speaks louder than appearance. I could feel it in myself too. When I walked into that place, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't checking if my jacket looked right or if my expression was confident enough. I was simply present, grounded. My mind wasn't rushing, and my thoughts weren't trying to predict what others might think of me. And because of that, my presence felt natural, not forced. I walked to the counter, ordered my drink, and as I waited, I kept thinking, if someone forms a first impression in less than a second, what exactly do they see? The answer, I realized, isn't visual. It's emotional. Women can sense how a man feels about himself before they try to figure out what he looks like. It's almost like they have a radar for authenticity. When a man enters a room with a clear, calm, grounded sense of who he is, it's noticeable without him saying a single word. And the opposite works just as fast. If he walks in nervous, unsure, constantly checking how others react to him, that energy spreads even faster than confidence. The girl by the window glanced at me once more as I picked up my drink. And although we didn't speak, I knew something important had happened. I started to understand that the first thing a woman notices isn't your style. It's your state of mind. Your presence becomes a message you send without trying. And the funny thing is, everyone feels it, even if they can't explain it. That day became the beginning of a new chapter for me, a deeper look into what truly shapes attraction and first impressions. And the more I learned, the more I realized how much power there is in simply being aware of yourself and the energy you bring into any space. After that day in the cafe, I started paying attention to something I had never really noticed before, the quiet confidence some people carry without even trying. It wasn't the loud, showy confidence that tries to take up all the space in the room. It was something different, something steady, grounded, almost calm. And I realized that this was exactly what women sensed first. I began to observe my own behavior. Whenever I walked into a new place, I asked myself, am I here with a clear mind, or am I trying to guess what others think of me? Most of the time, without even noticing it, I would shift my shoulders, fix my expression, or adjust my clothes, hoping to appear more put together. But none of that was real confidence. It was just me trying to control how I looked on the outside while ignoring the way I felt on the inside. True confidence, I realized, wasn't something I could act out. It wasn't about a perfect walk or the right facial expression. It was about not needing approval in the first place. It was about walking into a room with a calm mind, knowing that my value doesn't depend on anyone's reaction. I noticed that the men who stood out the most weren't the loudest or the strongest. They were the ones who felt comfortable in their own skin. They didn't rush. They didn't push. They didn't perform. They simply existed with a sense of quiet assurance. When they talked, their voices were steady. When they made eye contact, it was natural, not forced. Their confidence wasn't decoration. It was part of their presence. Women, I realized, pick up on this instantly. One evening, I was at a small gathering with some friends. There were new people I hadn't met before, and normally, I would try to make a good impression by talking more or acting more energetic than I actually felt. But this time, I tried something different. I didn't rush to speak or to entertain anyone. I just settled into the moment. I listened. I observed. I let conversations flow naturally without trying to control them. And something interesting happened. A girl at the gathering asked me a simple question, and as I answered, I noticed her expression soften. She wasn't reacting to my words. She was reacting to my calmness. The way I wasn't trying to impress her. The way I wasn't forcing anything. She smiled not because of the right line, but because of the energy behind it. That was the first time I truly understood. Confidence isn't loud. Confidence doesn't rush. Confidence doesn't try to prove. It simply exists. And this kind of confidence has a quiet magnetism that draws people in. When you don't chase approval, people naturally feel more comfortable around you. There's no pressure, no tension, just presence. I reflected on this a lot later that night. I realized that the moments when I tried the hardest to look confident were actually the moments when I felt the least confident inside. But when I stopped trying, when I simply allowed myself to be present, everything felt easier, smoother, more natural. And women notice this difference before anything else. Not the clothes, not the style, not the muscles, but the mindset, that invisible aura that surrounds someone who doesn't need to pretend. The more I explored confidence, the more I realized that it naturally led me to something even deeper. Calmness. Not the kind of calmness that means staying silent or avoiding people, but the calmness that comes from being centered inside, no matter what's happening around you. And I noticed something surprising. This quiet stability gets noticed even faster than confidence itself. There's something powerful about a person who doesn't react instantly to every distraction, every loud voice, every small inconvenience. Someone who doesn't rush their words or their movements. Someone who seems grounded, like they carry their own inner anchor. Women especially sense this immediately, and they respect it more than most men realize. I remember one moment that made this clear to me. I was in a crowded place, waiting in line with a few people ahead of me. Someone behind me was getting irritated, sighing loudly, tapping their foot, complaining about how slow everything was. Before, I might have reacted to that energy, felt annoyed myself, or tried to rush things even though I couldn't control the situation. But this time, I stayed completely calm. I stood there, breathing slowly, not letting anyone else's frustration pull me out of balance. And while I waited, I noticed a girl nearby glance at me with a curious expression. She wasn't looking at my clothes or trying to figure out who I was. She simply noticed the contrast, someone who wasn't getting caught in the noise around him. It wasn't the situation itself that mattered. It was how I handled it. I realized then that calmness is a signal, a quiet message that says, I'm in control of myself. And that message is incredibly strong. Over time, I started noticing how rare this calmness is. Most people react instantly to everything. A comment, a delay, a misunderstanding, a small inconvenience. But when someone doesn't react right away, when they pause, process, and respond intentionally, it changes the whole dynamic of any interaction. I practiced this more consciously. If someone interrupted me, I didn't rush to speak over them. If someone disagreed, I didn't argue impulsively. If something didn't go as planned, I didn't show frustration. And little by little, I started to feel a new kind of strength inside me. Not a loud strength, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that creates respect without effort. Women notice this almost instantly, not because they're analyzing you, but because calmness makes them feel safe, respected, and comfortable. It shows that you're someone who can handle life without falling apart over every small thing. One day, a friend of mine told me, "You always look like you know where you're going." At first I laughed, because honestly I didn't always know. But then I understood what he meant. Calmness looks like direction. Even when the path isn't perfectly clear, someone who stays balanced seems like someone who can handle whatever comes next. At a small gathering later, I was talking to someone I had just met. She told me, "There's something peaceful about the way you talk." And it struck me again, she wasn't reacting to my words, but to my presence, to the rhythm of the way I spoke, the pauses, the steadiness in my voice. Calmness itself was doing the talking. I learned that when you speak, you should speak with purpose. When you listen, listen fully. When you move, move with intention. This doesn't just make you more confident, it makes you more trustworthy. Because emotional stability isn't just attractive, it's reassuring. It tells people, I'm not here to create chaos. I'm here to bring clarity. And this is one of the first things a woman notices when she meets a man, long before she learns anything else about him. As I continued learning about presence, confidence, and calmness, I eventually reached the part that ties everything together, discipline. I used to think discipline was just about routines, schedules, or strict habits. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized that true discipline is something entirely different. It's not about forcing yourself into a rigid lifestyle. It's about being the master of your choices, your actions, and your emotions. And this, more than anything else, shapes how people, especially women, see a man. Discipline shows itself in ways most men never notice. It's not about having the perfect life or following a strict set of rules. It's in the everyday decisions, the small habits, the way you walk, the way you take care of yourself, the way you respond instead of react. You can't fake discipline. It's visible in the way you live. I remember one moment that made this very clear to me. I was getting ready to meet some friends, and I almost rushed out the door the way I often did before. But then I stopped for a second. I checked myself in the mirror, not to look perfect, but to make sure I was presentable, clean, organized. My shirt wasn't expensive, my shoes weren't brand new, but everything was neat, put together, intentional. That simple moment reminded me, discipline shows in the details. Later that evening, when I arrived, one girl in the group said, "You always look like you're ready for something important." She didn't mean fancy or formal. She meant prepared, steady, composed. I realized then that discipline gives you an aura of purpose. Even if you're just grabbing dinner with friends, people can sense when you live with intention. But discipline isn't just appearance. It's how you handle your emotions. There were times when I used to react quickly, get frustrated, raise my voice, argue without thinking. It wasn't dramatic, but it wasn't controlled either. And each time, I felt like I lost a little bit of myself. But once I started focusing on discipline, everything changed. I learned to pause, to breathe, to think before speaking, to choose responses that reflected who I wanted to be, not how I felt in the moment. And this emotional discipline is something women notice immediately. Because emotional control is not about hiding feelings. It's about guiding them. If you can stay steady when things get tough, if you can stay respectful even when you disagree, if you can keep your cool when the situation is stressful, that tells people you're dependable. It shows maturity without you ever having to say a word. One day, someone close to me told me, "You're different now. You don't chase things. You choose them." And that sentence stayed with me. Discipline gives you the ability to choose. Your reactions, your habits, your path. You stop living on autopilot. You start living intentionally. And that intention shapes your presence more than anything else. Women notice when a man has direction, not because he tells them, but because it shows in everything he does. When you're disciplined, you walk with purpose. You speak with clarity. You live with structure. You don't get thrown off by every distraction or temptation around you. And that's incredibly rare today. The truth is, you don't need to impress anyone when you live with discipline. You don't need to act like someone else. You don't need to pretend. Because discipline naturally creates respect. It tells the world, I'm responsible for myself. I take my life seriously. And that kind of energy is magnetic. Looking back at everything I learned, presence, confidence, calmness, discipline, I finally understood something important. Attraction isn't about pretending to be someone impressive. It's about becoming someone real, someone stable, someone who grows, someone who lives with intention. And that is what women notice first, long before they know your story, your style, or anything else about you. Your presence speaks before your words ever do. And the stronger your inner world becomes, the louder that presence feels.